what gets you from like 0 to 30 transactions is you just running around like a chicken with your head cut off and just hustling. But what gets you from 30 transactions to like 75, 100 and beyond is not you running around like a madman. It's understanding leverage, bringing on the right people, delegating. So it's kind of like we always hear, like what got you here is not going to get you there.
All right, everybody, welcome. A good friend of mine from Richmond, Virginia. This is Chris Elliott, and Chris is a team lead, runs a team of real estate agents in Richmond with Keller Williams. He's been in real estate for 10 years, right, Chris?
10 years.
And crushing it out there. And part of one of the reasons, and Chris and I got to meet each other through the Tom Ferry Network. That was probably 2 years ago now, right?
Yeah.
In San Diego. Was that where we met? Or was it Dallas first? Anyway, we a lot of the top agents meet out there for some training and camaraderie and networking, and got to know Chris and just really amazed at just some of the stuff he's been doing in such a short amount of time. There's a lot of agents out there that have been working in real estate, and in 10 years, what you've been able to do is pretty amazing. And one of the things, especially, is just how you have learned to, and I think a lot of real estate agents struggle with this keeping a great schedule. You've got a wife, you got 3 kids, you're doing a lot of production, and kind of how all that goes together is sometimes just a big chaotic mess. And so I was like, man, I think this would be a great topic for us to talk about. So Chris, first tell us a little bit about you, your business, and then let's jump right into, how to be, and again, this year you took 51 listings, which is no easy action items there, while being a dad, a good husband, right? You are. And
you want to tell my wife.
That's right. But yeah, let's jump right into it. Let's talk about that. Tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah. So like you said, and I appreciate the very generous and very kind words. So been in the business 10 years, run a team of 4, 2 sales agents, 2 administrative staff, and myself. So there's 5 of us total. Yeah, let's jump into schedule, because I think that's honestly the biggest thing that a lot of agents struggle with, and that's really what is one of the key components of holding them back, because it doesn't matter how bad you want something. If you can't figure out how to get it, then it doesn't matter how bad that you want it. I think if you want it bad enough, you could figure it out, but you do got to figure it out. And a schedule is a big part of that.
And for you, you started 10 years ago. Were you on a team, or did you start by yourself?
So I was a solo agent. You've been doing this a while, but like 10 years ago, teams were around, but they weren't as much of a thing as they are now. So I was kind of forced into being a solo agent, and I made it through. I stand here today, but I think you would agree, like either like run a team or be part of a team, because I think the days of the solo agent are just dying away quicker and quicker.
It's funny too, like even going on listing appointments, and I'm competing against a solo agent, and no offense to the solo agents, they're out there doing it, but when I have a team, when I'm offering a team work effort towards someone's listing and trying to get sold, it's so different, even comparatively to just an agent. I'm going to do your marketing, and I'm going to do your paperwork, and I'm going to do like everything. And, so yeah, you're right. 100%. Whether you're on a team or running a team, you're right. It's the way to go. And so did you have struggles? And dude, this is not just obviously real estate, because everybody that's in sales, usually if you're good, you're wired very similar, and it means you can do a lot of things at the same time, and we can easily get distracted. There's a million distractions out there for us. So getting a locked in schedule of doing the right things, because not just doing, because we know this in real estate, there's a million things you can do, but there are some key things that are the right things you need to be doing, and prioritizing that and learning how to put that in your schedule. So tell us how you started off with your schedule, and then maybe how it progressed, and how did you get there from from there, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So do you want me to talk about how I would build out a schedule for somebody that came to me and wanted success, or kind of like the evolution of my schedule?
I want to hear first the evolution, and then I want to jump into what's the direct advice you'd give someone how to build out a schedule.
Yeah. So I would say when I was first starting in the business, like I jumped in from a full-time career, long story short, quit that and then got into real estate full-time. So honestly, my first probably 18 months, I was just bouncing around like a pinball, just doing whatever I could to generate business. Like I had to make this work. I was dating, living with my now wife. I did not want to lean on her financially. She's always had a full-time job. And I was the crazy guy who got into real estate full time, right? So I just had to make it work. So, my schedule was very sporadic. Nobody really sat me down and said, like, hey, this is what you want to spend your time on. So I just was like a sponge, podcast, books, whatever I could learn, whatever I could figure out. And a lot of like what I found out, like the optimal schedule was just trial and error, which, you do what you got to do, but I don't think that's the optimal way to learn something. I think like tune into a podcast, find out what you should be doing. Right. So, really it was just a lot of the traditional stuff of like, I had an old school broker, so he recommended door knocking, which still works. So I did a lot of that. I did open houses. I ran sign calls. I was like, doing expireds. Literally, I started doing expireds, just like door knocking on expireds after they expired. So like, I didn't have the money for a dialer. I didn't have the money to like sign up for Vulcan 7. I couldn't do mailers. So I would literally get in my car, my crappy car at the time, and I would drive to their house. I would park a little far away because I didn't want them to see my car. And I would walk up, knock on the door and say, hey, I noticed your home came off the market. You're still interested in selling it.
And by the way, for those people that are listening and aren't in the real estate world, an expired is someone, explain that, Chris, what it is so they know. Because it's a hard sale to make.
Yeah, so an expired listing is someone that listed their home with a real estate agent. That home did not sell for one reason or another. Usually the agent let them down in some form or fashion, and they pulled either their agreement with their agent expired, or they pulled the home off the market before that, listing agreement kind of ran its course. So you've got somebody that is usually very angry because their home didn't sell. And now they've got like 20 to 30 real estate agents in the marketplace that are all soliciting them for their business. And they've all got like the answer, the silver bullet that's going to get that property sold. So it's a very, I didn't realize it at the time, but that's a very like competitive avenue of business. But I just didn't know any better. And I cut my teeth on it and ended up getting pretty decent at it.
Yeah. All right. So sorry, keep going. So that's what you were doing from the very get-go.
Yeah. So, and then, you start learning some things. You start learning like what really matters in your schedule. And as you mentioned, like there's a ton of stuff that you could do. There's a lot of stuff that you should do. But really what we always need to focus on is that 80-20 principle of like, what is the 20% of activities that really move the needle? And Ryan, in our business, it's lead generation. So, whatever that looks like, whether that's phone calls, direct messages, text messages, door knocking, open houses, smoke signals, sending out paper airplanes with your business card in it, like whatever your deal is, but that's usually what moves the needle. So I think over time, I get more and more focused, more and more structured of I was going to do that. And I was going to do that in the morning. If you listen to any old school real estate trainer, whether it's Tom Ferry, Mike Ferry, Brian Buffini, like you go down the list, they will all tell you that you should have a dedicated lead generation time block in your schedule. And they're all going to recommend that you do it in the morning. And the reason being, it's much easier to control your mornings than it is your afternoons in 100%. This business. And I think honestly, in any sales business, like usually like I remember my broker used to say like the mornings are for me, the afternoons are for my clients. So like, I'm going to take care of my business, what I need to do to move my business forward in the mornings. And then I'm going to go service my existing business in the afternoons and the evenings.
Well, and on that, it's interesting because I have coaching clients and I will tell you the number one thing that we battle with every single coach client. If you're listening, you know who I'm talking to, is that, hey, we come up, and that's the great thing about real estate, bro. You can pick whatever you want to do. If you want to door knock. If you want to just Go talk to all your friends and family. Go do that. If you want to do expires, you can do it. There's so many options. Go do investment properties, whatever. But at the end of the day, you do have to pick up the phone, talk to people, build relationships. We call that, I mean, you can call it prospecting. I don't really like that word, but that's, in a sense, that's what you're doing, right? Whatever sales you're in, you're doing that. And with every one of my coaching clients, do they know what to do? Yes. Do they do it for the most part? Yes, but it's extremely chaotic. And what you said was so big is doing it in the morning, because what always I hear is like, hey, someone called me and they wanted a showing this morning and I didn't get to do my prospecting time. And then the afternoon comes in and a million other things come in and I didn't do it. And that's the age old story. It keeps happening time and time and time again. I get on a new call every week. It's the same exact thing.
Well, here's the reality, Ryan, is they didn't want to do the prospecting to begin with.
Probably
the majority of the time. So the showing is the convenient excuse.
Yeah.
And let's call it like it is. I mean, like,
I like
if
that
I
convenient
don't want to
excuse,
wake up in the morning and go to the gym, it's very easy for me to say, like, oh, well, my kid wanted this or they had this going at the school, blah, blah. Can we cuss
Right.
on this?
I don't know, man. I have
Yeah,
no idea.
I'm going to. So
all right, go for it.
It's very easy to make up an excuse. So here's what I like. We're on this talking about schedule. I tell people you need to decide what outcomes you want out of your life before we start talking about a schedule. Because if you start building out your schedule before you've decided what the hell you want out of your life in the different areas of your life that matter, then your schedule is always going to be something that sounds good, something that Ryan told me I should do, something that Tom Ferry told me I should do, something that my parents suggested, whatever society deems acceptable, whatever nonsense that is. Like, you've got to make a decision. What do I want out of my business? What do I want out of my personal life? What do I want my health to look like? What do I want my relationships to look like? What do I want my wealth to look like? What do I want my fun vacations, travel to look like? And then what I recommend, break that down to the most minute actions, habits, and disciplines that you need to take on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. And then from there, we can build out your schedule.
Yeah, and the thing is, okay, so, and I'm kind of going to be the devil's advocate, just not because I believe what you're saying 100%.
Let's do it.
100% what you're saying. But this is what I hear from everybody else is, we do that, and we always talk about your why has got to be super important. What you described was the why. I want my life to look like this, so this is why I'm going to do it. So then at the end of the day, Chris, why, if they have that there, and they said, this is what I want, and these are the actions I've got to do in order to get what I want, why don't they do it? You said convenient excuses, but does that mean they really don't want it, or what does it mean?
I don't know. Like, this is part of like the success journey where like it's very frustrating to us as team leaders and to us as coaches, because people will come to us and they say, hey, I want to achieve X, Y, and Z. And you're like, cool, all you've got to do is A, B, and C. And then they don't do it. So my question is, do they really want that? Or is it just what sounds good? Am I interested in it, or am I committed to it? And that's a discussion that, you and I have heard a lot from the folks that we follow is this something that just kind of tickles your fancy to think about? Or is this something that like it's do or die for you?
Well, and do you, and I think that's really where it is. Man, I've had people who are even like on the cusp of financial, like bankruptcy and stuff like that. And I still can get you to make your calls. Do you not understand if you don't make calls, what happens? And part of it's like you said, the other question too is like some types of prospecting, some types of getting business is difficult and you don't like it. So I guess the question is it okay? I mean, like, do you do things? You did things back when you started that you're probably not doing now. Is everything that you do you like it?
No.
Yes.
Not at all.
But what makes you do it? What makes you keep doing it?
Yeah. So like, for example, and I don't want to mess up my webcam, but like right in front on the other side of my screen here is my dream board. So all of my goals, everything I want to accomplish is right there. To the left side of my wall right here is my TV, which has got all of our numbers. So I'm constantly reminding myself of what I decided that I wanted to accomplish, right? So I think you've just got to realize, like, hey, if I want, here's the other thing, Ryan. I think you've really got to be realistic with yourself of not only what do I want, but what price am I willing to pay to get the thing?
Mm.
Like, I've come to the realization I don't want six pack abs enough to do like the diet and the exercise and all. Like, I don't like, it's not that important to me. Like the price that you would have to pay to get that,
Right.
it's not worth it to me. So be realistic with yourself of like if you say you want to be a billionaire and then you really like understand what it means to be like what that's going to cost you as far as like time and effort and sacrifice and all those things, you might decide like, hey, that's really not that important to me, and that's okay.
Right.
But like you've really got to sit in and take some time to decide what do you want, and then what is it going to actually cost, or what is it going to take to achieve those things. And like they can reach out to you, they can reach out to me, they can sit down with their broker, their manager, their coach, or whatever, and they can probably lay out to them a very clear plan of like, hey, you say you want X and this is what it's going to take. And then you've got to really be an adult and make a decision. Is that something I'm going to do, or is that not something I'm willing to do? And if it is, then you just need to constantly remind yourself of the decision that you've already made.
Well, and I think too, it's like in some, like, fitness, you brought up fitness. Somehow I feel like, I guess if we pick out what goals get broken more than anything else, that are started off with, fitness would probably one. Because if you look at, New Year's resolutions, I think by 6 weeks in, 80% of people have already dropped all their New Year's resolutions, and usually weight is locked with it. The thing that's hardest for me too is like what I've learned to do, and I don't know if this has worked for you, and I want to hear too, because one of the things that I was really impressed with what you do is your numbers. I call expireds this many times a week. I spend this much time on it, and I make this amount of money. So then you're actually able to quantify how much I'm getting paid per hour to do this. What I was saying was like, one of the things that's been helpful for me is like, all right, and it's really just tracking, is going, all right, for my database, I know that if I have X amount of people in my database and I have been giving this many touches, reaching out, marketing, all that stuff to that database, I usually know how many transactions I'm going to be able to do. And so then I'm able to like divide that by the effort that I'm spending and go, hey, this marketing piece, this gift, this phone conversation, whatever, equals this amount, which is like no brainer. Because if I was to go to the general population in the US and go, hey, for every, I'm going to pay you $400 an hour. And here's what you need to do. All you need to do is reach out to these 300 people 30 times a year. I'd have a line at my office 10 miles long, but for some reason in people's head, it doesn't work like that. So how did you get yourself into the point to motivate yourself to do the things you didn't want to do? I know you said your why, but like, what were there any other special tricks of the trade to like that? I'm kind of mentioning that per hour thing that helped you get, because I really think it's mindset a lot of the times.
Yeah, well, I think, two things come to mind. Number one, you've just got to make a decision that you're not going to quit.
Yeah.
Period. Like, study anything from the Navy SEALs ethos, and like their whole thing is like, do not quit. Like, I will die before I quit. And if you have that, it's funny, we talk about resolutions. That word comes from the word resolve. Like, nobody's setting New Year's resolutions, right? They're
Right.
setting New Year's like would be nice to. But if you set that resolve of like, I am not going to quit, I'm going to do this until it works, then eventually what happens, Ryan, is you start to like, because we can tell people the math, but I think the problem is, Ryan, is that people don't believe the math. They either don't think what we're telling them is true, or they don't think it's true for them. Like, I've got a teammate that is literally convinced that phone calls don't work. And I'm like, like our business has, like, my personal business that like he sees every day, like, has been built on phone calls. So, but like, I say that because what I'm saying here is like, you've got to do the activity enough to where and track it to where you can actually start seeing the results and you can believe your own math. So like, you and I have both done this enough. We've like done the deal enough to where we know the ROI on the spend, on the activities. And like, nobody has to try to convince us because we've seen it for ourselves. But you've got to get past that threshold of, well, I don't think this is going to work. You got to kind of step out on faith a little bit and decide that you're going to do the thing. You're not going to quit, and that you're going to do it until it works for you. And then you kind of hit this trajectory of like, you're out of orbit, so to speak. Like it's like when the rocket takes off, it burns 90% of its fuel just to like get out of orbit. And then once it's out of orbit, it's very like, it doesn't take as much to motivate us because we've seen the results in our own lives.
Yeah.
But you got to just fight till you get to the point where you're starting to see some traction. And then you're like, okay, like I'm starting to figure this thing out. Right.
Yeah. So how long do you think? Because you're right what you said. I mean, like the things that I'm doubling down on in my business are things that I've seen work, and I'm going, all right, I'm going to keep doing more of those things because that's less time I'm having to spend to get a better result. But there's a lot of agents out there that want to try things, and then they don't, they try it for like a month and they're not getting a result. So how long do you think that length is to where you got to push through doing it, build the plan, do it before you're like, all right, maybe this isn't my forte per se?
Yeah, I think honestly, if you're not hitting something hard for at least 6 months, like you haven't earned the right to say that it doesn't work or it doesn't work for you. Like it's laughable, right? Like Ryan, you see it. Like we'll have agents that will make their calls like for a week, and they'll be like, "Hey, I don't think this works. Like, what else you got, coach?" Right?
Right.
Like it's a joke. Like you haven't done it long enough to do it. So I think you've got to get you got to give something 6 months and of really doing it at a high level and find out. Here's a pro tip for you. Find somebody that's whatever like lead gen strategy that you want to do. Find somebody that's doing it at a high level and getting results at a high level. Find out for them what it takes. Because like we have a lot of people that are like, oh, like I want to do that. And they're like, what do I need to do? And they're like, oh, I'm going to make calls like every other Friday. And you're like, that's not going to work. Like you got to do this for like 2 to 3 hours a day, 5 days a week.
Right.
And like, oh, by the way, like it's going to take you more phone calls to get the same results than I'm able to get because I'm more skilled at it because I've been doing it longer. So like if you want to get the results that I'm getting, like you've got to not only do the effort that I'm doing, but you've probably got to do another 20, 30, 40, 50% because you're not as skilled at the activity.
Yeah. Right. So tell us, all right, and then let's go straight to it. All right. Yeah. You just mentioned it. How someone who's out there who's like, all right, I'm ready. Chris, you talked me into it. I'm going to do it. I got my why. How do I set up my schedule? Tell me exactly how to set up my schedule. What do you do?
Yeah. So the first thing before we even start talking about your schedule, you've got to look at the different areas of your life, the different arenas, the different equities of your life, and figure out what your goals are for 2024. So the categories that I personally look at are business, personal finance and wealth, my health, my relationships, my personal growth, and fun. Like those are the categories in my life. You can set up your own. And then, like I said, we're going to figure out what are the smallest, most minute actions that you need to take to move the needle forward in those goals. So for example, for me, like one of the things that I want to do is I want to have an amazing, loving relationship with my wife, which is an amazing goal, but it's also kind of a fuzzy goal, right? So we need to set some like KPIs around that, some lead measures. So for me, if I can call my wife at lunch every day that I'm at work, if I can be home by 6 p.m. every day, unless I have a qualified bona fide listing appointment, and if I can turn my phone off from 6:30 to 7:30 every night, and if I could do 2 date nights a month, like if I can do those 4 things, we're going to have an amazing relationship, right? So that's just an example. Like you got to figure out what those little things are for you. If you need help, find a coach. So then once we like know what we need to do on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, then it becomes very simple. We just look at a schedule. You can go into, print off one or go into Google Calendar and create your ideal working day, right?
I like that.
So every day that I'm working, if I had a perfect day, what would it look like? Some things to include in that schedule. What time are you going to wake up? What time are you going to go to sleep? What time are you going to exercise? And if you're like, hey, I'm not really a gym person, I don't care. You are a human being. You need to exercise on a daily basis. What time are you going to spend in personal development if that's something that's important to you? What time are you going to get into the office? What time are you going to generate new business develop, lead gen, prospecting, whatever you want to call it? What time are you going to turn off and be done for the day? And that's important for like our super high achiever, like type A, like crazy people that just go, 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 go and never stop and then just burn out. Um, what time are you going to eat your meals? And then one thing that I like, Ryan, in today's like day and age of like this thing being glued to the hip 24/7 is build out some do not disturb time. So like if I'm not in an appointment, I'm home at 6, my phone goes off from 6 to 7:30, and it's time that I'm there present for my family, but it's also time that I'm not like checking emails, text messages, and phone calls for like an hour and a half. Just for mental clarity, it's been
great,
great.
man.
Yeah.
I need that.
It's been helpful. It's been helpful. And then as you're building that out, a couple things to think through is what do you need to add? What do you need to subtract? What do you need to plus? What do you need to minus in order to achieve your goals? So this is where we really have to be objective and realistic of based on the schedule that I have, is this going to get me to the results that I want to get? Right? So if you say, hey, I want to crush it in my business next year, but like you don't get into the office until 11 a.m. in the morning, and then you take a 2-hour lunch break, like do you, but like, is that really going to get you what you want to get? Right.
Right.
And then here's another one. Do you have any goals that are competing with each other? So you could say, hey, I want to crush it in my business, but I also want to become a scratch golfer and I want to practice my golf game for 3 hours a day.
Right.
And I want to be a husband and a father and like do all the, like, is that realistic? And you just got to be objective with yourself. So that's that. And then we're going to go into then building out our ideal week. So once you've built out your ideal workday, building out your ideal week is relatively simple because you're more or less like your Monday through Friday or whatever your work week looks like is already done. But then you just need to build in the other stuff like when am I going to have family time? What are going to be my days or my time off? When am I going to inject fun into my life? For our friends in the real estate business, when am I going to do my open houses? What are the nights of the week where I'm not going to do showings past a certain amount, a certain time? So if you're really buyer heavy in your business right now, do you have like 2-3 days a week where you say, hey, I don't work past 6 p.m. on these specific days? Or like I take Tuesdays off and I turn my phone off, right? So this requires a little bit of thinking, a little bit of planning. You've got to pre-plan your weekends, pre-plan your date nights, decide what nights you're going to have off. And then just communicate those things to your loved ones, communicate those things to your clients. So that way everybody's on the same page, right? And then once again, guiding questions. What do you need to add? What do you need to subtract? What do you need to do more of? What do you need to do less of? And then do you have any goals that are competing with each other, right? And just be realistic about it. That's it.
And that's it. That's what you do. So when you're, so just like you're, and you said like, and I think that's great. I think I do the ideal calendar. I do it. I always kind of do it when I'm doing my business planning as well for the next year. I try to get my wife to take a look at it, see what she thinks. Where I get a little sloppy is, and like if you're using Gmail calendar, or whatever, I just create a whole calendar in that and then hide it. And then kind of every now and then look at it.
I like that. So you create like an ideal calendar and then I like that.
And then I hide it because if you put that up there the whole time, it's going to drive you crazy because you're going to feel like it just becomes noise. But then I'll look at it like, okay, I need to kind of be working on this in that afternoon. The thing I have realized too is and I'm not anywhere where you're at when it comes to, your time blocking schedule, but the more anything I put on my calendar is if I can put something in there that actually holds me accountable. So for instance, I hear a lot of people like, I want to do social media stuff, or I want to do, marketing digitally, and you got to film, you got to record, you got to plan. So the fact that I hire a videographer to do that, he's coming, I got to be ready. If he comes and I'm not ready, I got to pay for it. So now I'm just like in my brain, the more I have things like that in my calendar, it's it's very hard for me to break away from doing it. The thing with like, like the hard things, like have you figured out a way to create some accountability, like prospecting? Because for instance, like the videographer, he didn't, I'm going to have to pay for that. Prospecting, it's like, well, I didn't do it. What's one day really going to be that I didn't do it? Have you found any tricks for accountability that way?
Yeah, so full disclosure, I mean, like that's never been a tough one for me. I know that it is for a lot of people. Create some negative consequence around if you don't do what you're supposed to do, like you owe somebody or some cause that you don't believe in money. Have somebody else hold you accountable. I've had people where like they set up like a Google Meet or a Zoom call where everybody jumps on and they kind of like just mute themselves, but we're all on this together, so
That's
we're all
great.
doing it. Dude, I'll tell you one thing, and I know you probably know this. You know this as a team leader and also a coach, is like when you start leading people, man, that holds you accountable because they're
Yep.
looking at you and you're the standard. So
Yep.
like, yeah, you better be getting it in the office. But yeah, you just like, here's the cool thing though, Ryan. Like if you set up, I have a very boring schedule. Like it's so freaking boring. And that's one of the like challenges of success is success when you really figure it out is just doing the same things at work over and over and over and over again.
Yep.
But like when you have that repetitive schedule, then you learn how to optimize it. Because when every day is different, it's very hard to optimize like something that's just always happening on the fly. But if you do the same things over and over and over again, then you really figure it out. So like one thing I figured out, I try to get in the office by 7:45 every morning. And I figured out if I like to role play and like practice my scripts and dialogues. So I schedule those at 7:30 in the morning with different role play partners. And if I'm not in my car, like driving to the office when that call comes in, if I'm like still in the house and still getting ready, I'm kind of letting that other person down.
Mm.
But like if I can know that I got to get in the car and start driving and then like I'm ready for the phone call, it magically always gets me to the office by the time that I need to get to the office.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, it's the same thing for me. Like, dude, I mean, besides high school and working out at the gym, then because I had to with sports or whatever. Besides that, up till about 5 years ago, my gym was like my workouts were like I'd go a month, I'd quit. I'd go a month, I'd quit. I try something, I quit. The only thing that has ever kept me locked in is I started doing group fitness where you're in a class and you know people there and you're like, hey, Alan, I'm gonna meet up with you at 6 o'clock at the class. And 5 years I'm consistent every week because and all it came from was just like I'm the type of person that has in the really hard things I have to have someone do it. So maybe for the person that's like struggling there, it's like do what you just said. Like even if it's hey, I need a prospect if that's their thing. I got a prospect for 2 hours a day. All right, well let's just throw us up on Zoom together. I'm watching you, you're watching me, you're in California, I'm in Virginia, whatever it is. And that maybe that's a way. Have you seen anything with your team that's something like that's maybe helped them? I mean, coming into the office is probably a big deal, right? Versus working virtually, you
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
hide.
So I am not one of these work from home people. I think it's a
Right.
bunch of nonsense. I'll go on the record and say it.
Sure.
I've always been a like in office because it's just that modality, Ryan, of like if I've got to get dressed and show up, I just show up differently than if I'm sitting in my PJs at my house. But no, one thing that we do with the team is we start every 4 days a week. We start the day at 8:30 in the morning with a role play session. So we're practicing our scripts and dialogues. As sales professionals, we talk to people for a living. It might be helpful to practice how to talk to people.
That's right.
So
That's
we
right.
start at 8:30, and then by the time we're done, it's 9 o'clock. And then it's like, okay, like you're supposed to like hit the phone. So like let's not go to Starbucks. Let's not go, to Hardee's to get a biscuit. Let's actually go to our office and do what we need to do. But you're already here. We've already practiced it. It's kind of like you're setting yourself up for success. If I force you to be here at 8:30 in the morning and practice your scripts, it's kind of awkward if you don't go make your phone calls then because you're already here, you're already dressed, like we're all doing it. And that's the value, in my opinion, of a team in our business of like everybody wants to do their own thing, but doing their own thing usually leads to destruction.
Are there some things that you could share out there that like so I know expired is one, you can share that number, but are there any other numbers besides that? And please share that one is, that you've learned, hey, I spend this amount of time a day, it's going to equal this result?
Yeah, so I mean, I would say for the last probably for the last 4 or 5 years, we've generated over 500 grand in GCI. And in that time, I've always had a 2 to 3 hour time block of making phone calls.
And for you, that's your SY past clients, expireds, anybody else that.
Yes.
And
Yes.
if you don't have it, you're going to find another list to call.
Yeah. Like if you just make a decision, I am going to call somebody for 3 hours every single day, you will figure out the lead sources, right?
Right.
This whole like, I don't know who to call, like that's a bunch of nonsense. Like if you
Right.
just like make the resolution, I'm going to call somebody and talk to them about real estate for 3 hours every single day.
Yeah.
Like you'll figure out real quick who you need to call. Another number, like you brought up sphere of influence. So I came up on expireds. That's how I built my business. I've since transitioned to more of a sphere of influence past client because there's more money to be made there long term.
Right.
I can tell you we get a 10x return on our spend on our sphere of influence. So like if you're a seasoned agent out there and you're like, hey, it's funny, I've got an agent on my team. Um, he's in some very niche communities in town just due to his religion and due to his ethnicity. They're just smaller pockets of people in our town. So I'm like, dude, you should work those communities. And he's like, well, I think I want to chase expireds. And I'm like, this makes no sense at all. Like, go talk to the people that already know, like, and trust you, that you already have this bond with, and just become that agent in those communities before we start go cutting our teeth on expireds. So I would say start with the people that are closest to you because you're going to have the highest probability of success. And then we could go start chasing the harder leads.
Like, what are some of the biggest struggles you had in your career from where you started to where you now, and how did you overcome them?
There's been several times I've wanted to quit. Just because things get hard, it gets tough. You feel like you made a terrible career decision to get in the real estate business or get into sales. And just don't quit. Just keep moving forward. It always gets better over time. And you just got to keep that perspective. I think the other one that was tough for me, Ryan, was embracing leverage. Just because what gets you from like 0 to 30 transactions is you just running around like a chicken with your head cut off and just hustling. But what gets you from 30 transactions to like 75, 100 and beyond is not you running around like a madman. It's understanding leverage, bringing on the right people, delegating. So it's kind of like we always hear, like what got you here is not going to get you there. So you've got to be able to learn how to pivot and realize like, okay, like I built my business to this point just on hustle, but like Jeff Bezos has not built a $1 trillion empire on hustle. Like it's through systems and leverage and people. So like you've got to eventually embrace that.
And if you're new in the business and your schedules are scattered and you're not doing what you know you need to be doing, what would you like? My schedule's my schedule's bad. I'm not making the money I want to make. I'm kind of lost. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. What would be the first few steps you would have that person who's probably alone out on a team or something like that? What would you tell them to do?
I would say either join a team or hire a coach.
Got it. And then
Simple. You need a mentor. You need somebody to show you the way and hold you accountable. And in our business, that's either going to be a good team leader. So you're going to be on a good team, not just some agent that's like slapping agents under them and we're calling it a team, but everybody's running around doing their own thing. Or you're going to go to somebody like yourself and hire a coach. It's going to cost you $12,000 to $15,000 a year. It's an investment worth making. But it's either one of those two things.
Got it. All right. Well, any last minute things of wisdom you can pass on to those that are struggling, trying to figure out how to make? I mean, this year has been a hard year. I mean, I looked up. We're here in Houston. The average agent production is down 25% or something like that. Overall, the country's pretty much down. Any last words of wisdom to those out there that are in real estate or in sales you want to throw out there?
Yeah, be glad it's hard. If it wasn't hard, we wouldn't make the money we make. If it wasn't hard, everybody would do it. And when it starts to get hard, you need to train yourself to get excited, because that's where most people quit. And if you can push past where most people quit, that's where all the money is.
Any books that you've read recently that have been worth mentioning for other people to read?
So I'm going to give you an oldie but a goodie: How to Win Friends and Influence People. I reread that every single year. We are not in the real estate business. We're in the people business. And if you don't believe that, like, don't be good dealing with people, and let me know how
Right.
well you do.
Good old Dale. Yes, that's a
Yep.
great book. I haven't read that one in a while. That's really good. I think a good one to go with what you're talking about is either Atomic Habits or Compound Effect. They both have similar structure,
Yeah.
but for me, someone here is like calling for 2-3 hours a day. I get it, and there's some people who can just like toughen up and go do it. But I'm like, all right, if you're not there and you can't just go do that, start with 30 minutes a day and do it for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And do that successfully, and then add another 15-30 minutes, and then go do that for another 2 weeks, till then you'll start to see. I mean, that's again, it's the compound effect. You'll start to see the compound effect go through. So
Yeah.
cool, man.
Agreed.
Well, thanks again. If you, by the way, if you guys are out there and you need a good real estate team, whether you're looking to join a team in real estate or you need someone to help you find, sell a home, Chris and the Elliott team at Keller Williams, they're the people to work with. Chris, thanks again, man.
Thank you, brother.
We'll talk soon.
See you, bud.
See you, bud.